please join me in welcoming Gabriela Ramos. Gabriela Ramos is no stranger to anybody in this room. She is the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences at UNESCO. And Renata Dwan, who we are delighted to have. Renata is the Special Advisor in the Office of the UN Secretary-General Envoy on Technology. So I get to. Let's just begin by doing a little bit of how did we get here? And I think of all of the work that has happened at UNESCO over the years, all of the work that's happened around ethics frameworks and recommendations, the work that you and your team have been leading. So when you think back, Gabriela, about that work and how it has laid the foundations for where we want to go, what's top of mind for you? What do you think, where were some of the successes, and what do you think we need to really be thinking about as we move forward?
Well, first and foremost, so great to be here with you, and so great to have the Global Digital Compact, I hope, approved and really informing the policy, seeing so many friends, Microsoft, Amanda. The fact is that I feel that, thankfully, the conversation is changing. You talk about Darren. Darren is going to come on the 9th of October to my master class on Alan Hirschman, talking about the specific issues. I think that we were caught into this narrative that you lead the technologies by themselves, and there's nothing you can do because you don't even understand them. Well, UNESCO, with our ethics work, we said, no, we can do something about it. We can do something about it because it's not a matter of becoming geeks and understanding every single element of what is the latest development and being able to say, no, you put this ingredient, don't take that, another one. No, that's for the experts. What we are looking is how do we as governments, as societies, as companies can steer the technological revolution to help us build more inclusive societies. And if we think that the worst problem we are facing today is this increase in inequalities of income opportunities within countries, between countries, that is translating into this political polarization, then we should ask ourselves, is this technological progress helping us to narrow the gaps or widening them? Well, no, because it's not being steered ethically. And therefore, I feel that UNESCO's work, UNESCO, by the way, I know that we always think that you know exactly what we do in life because we are so well. No, well, UNESCO is a house of culture, education, science, social and human sciences, but also we are the house of ethics because since 3 decades ago, our members decided that they wanted us to bring the experts to look at the technological developments, all of them, and they are sessioning now in Paris, those experts looking at quantum computing, synthetic biology, aerospace issues, climate engineering. They ask us to look at the ethics of AI, and they ask us to translate it into this recommendation on the ethics of AI that was approved in 2021, 193 countries. Great, the US came back because of this work, 194 countries following the thing. But this recommendation is very straightforward and is steering the thing. Aligning with human rights, human dignity, very core into the Global Digital Compact, environmental sustainability, gender equality, human dignity, and that's the ethics, because the ethics relies on human rights, yes, but also human dignity. Is this really enhancing and empowering people, or this is just creating a disruption that nobody can manage or think about, and we feel out of control? And so since we adopted in 2021, we said, great to have an agreement, now we have to have tools, and we created the readiness assessment methodology. Now we are applying it in 60 countries all around the world. This is telling countries where they are not only in infrastructure, skills, capacities, that is the standard issue, but also how do they see that they want these technologies to help them with their own strategic vision of their countries, because this is about them deciding what they want to do with the technologies. Gen AI, a blessing in disguise for this conversation, because everybody got so scared that then everybody's looking at how do we work together? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the work that the civil society is doing, we're working with Microsoft, with the Council, Business Council, so it's a conversation that needs to come together, but as you say, it's about policies, investments, incentives. We cannot have this revolution being informed just by profit-making decision. Of course, the business sector needs to be profit-making, we are not naive, but cannot be the only thing. And the reality is that when you have 80% of these technologies being developed by just 2 countries, here 60%, China 20%, there's something that needs to be said about the business model. But at the end, it's not UNESCO that is going to tell the world how to do things. We are bringing the countries to really get together. And we have been working very closely with Renata, with Amandeep, and with the UN system. We co-host an interagency working group with the ITU because all of the UN system is really looking into these issues.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, Renata. So first of all, I think in addition to I think about all of the foundational work that UNESCO has done, I really do think that you have led, and under the Tech Envoy's leadership, really a very consultative and inclusive process over the last year. You put together, I think, an impressive advisory body that was able to give you, from what I understand, they worked very hard to really craft and shape the report that came out yesterday. And in some ways, the reason why, I think it was coming out as late as it did was because these matters are so important. So congratulations to that. Congratulations for those of us who were members of the network of experts. Really felt like we had an opportunity to engage in that work. But now we want to hear from you. Where are we? We have the report that came out last night. Can you give us a quick summary of the recommendations? Can you give us some insight into the negotiations? I know part of your role has been working on the Global Digital Compact. Where is that? What do you think is going to be in there? What can you share with us in this moment?
Yeah, well, great to be here. And Rebecca, I want to thank you because you have been, and your network of experts really helped the high-level advisory body on AI's report that came out yesterday. I hope all of you have had a chance to take a look at it. Being UN, it's not short. And even the summary is not short, but there are lots of pretty pictures. And I really do hope you'll reflect and think and help us as we go along. I also do want to congratulate the community at large because, one of the justified criticisms of the UN is that it moves slowly and breaks things. But in the case of the UN, this was a report that the SG established this committee in October. 9 months later, we have a report that I think is far-reaching and is an independent report. I want to be really clear, this is not a negotiated report. This report is the culmination of 39 experts from around the world and consultations with over 1,000 networks, the learnings from the UN system and reflections. So it makes 7 recommendations. And maybe let me just take a step back and say, what it does is say, an general purpose technology such as AI, with the global impact that it has, requires a global response. That's not new to you, but it can be new to many of the policy-making community at national and local levels. Second, it says, the debates around this emerging global governance regime that we're seeing with the regional initiatives like the EU AI Act, with the African Union's continental AI strategy, with some of the initiatives that you mentioned, Rebecca, the Bletchley, the Seoul, the upcoming French summit. They are important first steps, and they are really critical, but they are limited to a set of, broadly speaking, like-minded states. 118 states do not participate in any one of these discussions. And so the basic principle of the UN as a global organization is that if you want to have addressing the global governance of a technology that needs a global approach, then you do have to have a global conversation. The second issue that it's saying, and you've already touched on all of those points, Gabriela, is that we need to think about the asymmetries. We need to think about the information asymmetries, the market asymmetries, the knowledge asymmetries, and the capacity asymmetries. Because we need to think about the equality and the opportunity to address benefits and risks. And so it sets forward a set of 7 recommendations for, and I want to be really clear on this, for distributed AI governance. It is not establishing a single institute for the AI management and governance, nor is it saying that we're creating an apex with the UN at the top. What I think we're trying to say is we need to establish common understanding through a panel, a scientific panel on AI that brings together expertise with a view to establishing a sustained conversation on where we go forward on AI, a global policy dialogue that is multi-stakeholder. That's the recommendation of the advisory body. Third, a standards exchange where we start to have a sustained engagement on the interoperability of our standards that are emerging, and also on how do we think about the socio-technical aspects, that standards can no longer be seen, if it ever were, as primarily technical regulatory frameworks. Fourth, capacity building initiatives, that it drives forward those and it proposes a set of initiatives to look at talent, data, compute sharing. Then it looks at data, data framework, proposals for having how we might think of data exchanges and addressing some of the critical issues around liabilities, monetary, fiduciary aspects of data government and management. And then finally, it proposes an AI fund, a global fund to develop capacities for AI. So I think in that way it's saying, we're not saying one entity do everything. We're saying a set of networks looking at different functions. We're saying they should be multi-stakeholder. We're saying they should harness and benefit the knowledge of groups like PAI, groups like GPAI, OECD, the mechanisms, but that we try to nudge, as Gabriela says, this incredibly powerful technology in the direction of public interest and in the direction of an inclusive engagement. So that's where the HLab is. Please take a look at it, and thank you to many of you who contributed to it.
Thanks very much for that update. And so now let's look to what we hope is going to happen on Sunday, which will be the release of the Global Digital Compact, maybe before Sunday, we'll see. And then the conversations that will take place and the dialogues that are going to take place through the Summit of the Future and what should come from that as well. So, Gabrielle, I would be really interested. I'm so happy that you sort of broke down for us what UNESCO stands for, because of course science and education is so crucial as we think about, you know, the panel as it will evolve, and to really, I mean, this is one of the things that we all know so much in this community is the lack of consensus around, and I think the State of Science report, which we're going to hear about a little bit later from Benjamin when he presents, is, you know, was really honest about saying that there is a lack of consensus about the capabilities, risks and harms of these, particularly these largest models as they evolve as well. So what are you thinking, Gabriela, now going into this, and how do we need to think about science and its capacity for moving forward, really the international conversation about AI and how AI can be benefiting communities and people?
Well, this is a fascinating moment, I think, because at the end there is a realization that we are not well equipped to think about the policy to outcomes. So let alone the conversation about knowing the technology, because another narrative was that you cannot do anything until you understand 100% the technology. How can you dare to think about, no, well, hold it. I might not know whether your algorithm was completely biased or whether the data or the synthetic data is gathering information that they should not be using without consent. But if I am the government that is in charge of the duty of care, of the rule of law, and there is harm, I should have the rules to address those harms. So I feel that the conversation is moving to the outcome-based discussion, the impact of the technologies. It has been so much about the technologies. It's not about the technologies. It's about the impact in our societies, because that's where we get the agency back. That's where we say, hold it. I don't want my children to be harmed with these things. And then you start learning. And this is amazing, because what I'm seeing is that governments and NGOs and academia, the scientific panel, I think is an amazing outcome of the GDC, are now focusing on understanding better. And from our perspective, having a global conversation, Renata said, yes, it needs to be global. Last year in Slovenia, we have 67 countries, and from them, half of them were doing the readiness assessment methodology. Because I think we need to be super scientific, evidence-based. How are you going to understand where you are if you don't have an assessment of your capabilities? And I have to say that this goes for the G7 too. The fact that the G7 countries are establishing their national AI institutes that first were about safety, but now it's about general thing, is because we need to understand better. We need to bring the science and the scientific understanding. But the other part is I will invest a lot, and I love what you said at the beginning, because it's about understanding the policies. And I love also because I was thinking, like Darren, because I speak with him sometimes, this is about like moving the world out of fossil fuels. If you just let the markets, you will never get out. President Biden said, I think I need to have some tools and incentives. And he put subsidies for renewables, and he put taxes for fossil fuels, and he put investments in capabilities, and then, of course, the market starts moving. And therefore, how are we going to shape the markets? And then don't try to because then they tell me, yes, but your recommendation was in 2021, how are you going to be catching up, no? The reality is that the 24 experts, international, from all corners and from all multidisciplinary, which is also super important, they decided to leave a definition of AI open. It's computer-led functions that might resemble human intelligence, perfect. And then you don't need to worry if it is a statistical or if it's a prediction or a forecast or if it is reasoning. And then it's just about equipping yourself. And for me, the most important part is how do we support the countries that are completely lagging behind. I was very proud, let me tell you, from the RAMs that I'm doing, you will not believe it, but Somalia came to tell me why I don't have a RAM, Madame ADG. I'm like, yes, let's do a RAM. And then I'm thinking, my God, Somalia, with the conflicts. Well, yes, let's do a RAM. And then I did the RAM from Mozambique, and they're telling me, okay, now I have the RAM. Who's going to build my data centers? Who's going to help me with the computing capacity that you say I don't have? And who's going to help me in the government to understand better how the policies to outcome really shape these things and the skills and the... So I'm hoping that with the Global Digital Compact and the interest this is generating, we are going to be supporting the countries, because at the end what the countries are telling us is, I don't want to be a consumer. I don't want to just go to the markets and manage my health systems, acquiring the latest technology. I want to do it myself, because the cultural issues, the diversity issue, the mindset, and I can tell you every single RAM that we do, we find experts that are local. The RAM for Senegal is with the Senegalese experts. The RAM for Mexico is a Mexican. And then we bring all the big experts, because we also have the AI experts without borders, very big, with Sue Russell and Joshua Bengal, these very big, and some of the people that work with our dear friend Renata. But I think it's very important that we get together, learn from each other, see how things can be tackled, and then get countries, their agency, to decide how they want to deal with it.
Such a good point. Yeah, thank you so much.
Just a word on the Global Digital Compact. So I want to be really clear, it's not yet approved. And we are in the final days of negotiations, and it's a sensitive time. And it's a non-binding document. I also want to be clear about that. But it's still a significant, and I would argue a significant global document. Why? This is the first comprehensive global framework for digital cooperation. We've had initiatives on specific aspects. We have human rights and digital technologies. We've had 20 years ago, the World Summit on Information Society, looking at the internet, but we haven't had a comprehensive agreement on, this is a roadmap for digital cooperation. These are the principles and the values, the normative basis on which it sits, the charter, international law, human rights. And third, how do we then, it sets out actions and commitments, as well as a review process for member states to come back and say, where are we going on that? So it is not an AI governance commitment, it is a comprehensive statement on digital cooperation. And I think that's important in the AI governance debate going forward on global AI governance, because it circles back to issues that keep coming up in the debate: infrastructure, literacy, connectivity. An AI capacity building strategy makes no sense if you have load shedding for 18 hours a day, or if you don't have access to this electricity. So I think it is bringing us back to a more holistic approach to that AI, which is good. It has 5 objectives. very much focused on closing digital divides and, again, looking at the applications of technologies for the SDGs, for accelerating progress. And I don't think any of us, and those of you who do come from the Global South, the global majority, however you wish to describe that, it is absolutely critical that we all understand just at how imperiled the SDGs are and how much the last COVID and beyond has impacted states' journeys and their development pathways. So that's a critical step. It puts fostering human rights at the center as an objective, including around digital trust and safety and information integrity. And then it includes some important commitments, objectives around data governance, which is a very new step that we're going to have a global conversation on data governance, as well as on the AI governance. The three recommendations it has taken up from the high-level panel is first, the scientific panel, a commitment to go forward with the establishment of it. Second, the launch of a policy dialogue that will take place on an annual basis and including drawing on forums like yours, UNESCO's forum on the global ethics and the continuing conversation on forums like the ITU, AI for Good Summit, on the margins of the GA. And third, it has asked the SG to come with innovative financing proposals for a global fund on AI capacity development. So there's a lot at stake there, and fingers crossed.
Thank you. I think that's a really, really helpful insight as we move in through the weekend. Okay. Well, who's going to take questions for me? Is there a microphone? Someone got a microphone? Oh, there we go, John. Okay. John is also the author of the report I mentioned this morning, so if he happens to be walking by you, please, congratulate him as he comes by. Who has a question?
As we all know, AI is power hungry. So how does the climate impact kind of mix in with all of the things that you folks are working on?
Can I just take that? Because one of the reasons why we're having such a hard time in the final stages of these discussions are exactly around climate issues and notions around what barriers are being put up towards developing countries as they see it to engage in their digital transformation agenda. So I think the question of what does the power requirements that are everybody knows are essential, but how do we think about that in a green transition context? And how does that not create further inequalities is at the heart of the discussion. So I'm just being very frank, that was some of the hardest issues to negotiate in the Global Digital Compact and in the overall Pact of the Future. I would just also say, and Gabriela talked about the REAM and how UNESCO supporting countries think about their readiness assessment for their digital transformation journey in AI. I think we also do need a frank conversation on how does sovereignty and collaboration and pooling look like in an energy poor environment. And I think that's one of the next steps that debate really needs to come out as we think about what does data centers look like that are equitable and interoperable, but we cannot create the illusion that every country is going to have a data center and a capacity. And that's a difficult moment in a sovereignty when a global South country sees global North countries adopt AI frameworks as not part of almost industrial policies and national geoeconomic strategies.
Maybe to complement, because I think this is a question, the environmental impact of AI, or let's say the contribution of AI to the climate transition, whatever way, because it has to be both, is I think a magnificent example of what I'm saying in terms of how do you steer the developments of the technologies. And we have the tools. Because at the end, imagine if governments have 12% of their GDP in public procurement, and they will put just one condition to any supplier of technologies for government-led purposes, that it should be fed with renewables. You change the conversation. Therefore, I think that the question of the technological option and the options that we decide which one we follow, if it's one that is just focusing on automation, or it is one that goes like with the water consumption that we have just experienced, or the waste, no, the mining and all these things. First, you put it under this light, and I think that the recommendation also included that chapter as part of the sustainability part. But at the end is, again, not not about getting into criticizing the technology, because how is it possible that they consume energy of 25 trips from Europe to with one go, no? But actually, how do we shape it? How do we make sure that the market actors have the incentives to invest in the technologies that will contribute to our climate goals?
Thank you. Okay, and I want to make sure we get, because we're running, so why don't we take your question, Sebastian, and I think there's another question in the back. Hi. Let's take those together, and then I'll have you finish them up. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Again, a question on the Global Digital Compact. The compact talks about essentially the governance and the shaping of the digital space. And by its construction, it reaches all the actors that are willing to work in a constructive direction. What is the role of the notion of resilience of the digital space against actors that might just not play by the rules that we try to establish globally? Thank you.
Great. So the question of resilience, let's go to the back and get York's question as well. One last question from anybody before as we have to wrap up and move on to our next amazing panel.
Thank you very much. My name is Juraj Čorba. I'm acting chair of IGO OECD and co-chair of Global Partnership on AI. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I have a question regarding the scientific panel and the science of AI, as we have certain expectations, right, in the Global Digital Compact. I'm just wondering, was there any discussion inside the UN advisory panel or in the wider circles on the controversy of the science on AI? Because, you know, there are experts that claim basically that the modern approach to AI is today an engineering at best, and also to analyze human behavior when interacting with the AI systems. It's also challenging to speak of science, right? So I'm just wondering, what are the expectations of the scientific approach, and whether there was any discussion about the limits of science as we know it in relation to current AI?
Great. So the scientific panel, resilience, you're going to...
I need to leave, but I really want to say that it's amazing the work that they have done. We're really looking forward to working on the scientific panel, exactly, and also with the question of the global dialogue. Let me ask very fast, because I need to rush. I have a meeting at 11. Daniela Rodriguez and Jill Shocker. Daniela is here in New York. Whomever wants to get in touch with her, Jill is in Washington. And I don't know if we need to be a woman to be in this panel, but sorry, it's okay. Yeah?
It's the right way to start the day. Thank you so much.
Okay,
resilience and science, and then
maybe I'll take the scientific panel question first, because it was controversial, and I will be very open about that. I think there was a real concern on the part of many states that an international scientific panel at the UN level could try to push towards consensus and could try to push towards a single statement of consensus. And as you rightly point out, the science is not consensus. And anyone who works in a scientific context, or as a researcher, and many of you, and certainly I have a background in that, that is not how we understand scientific investigation, or indeed even scientific understanding. So I think one of the really important messages that the H Lab articulates is that we may not be coming at agreement. The purpose of the panel is not to produce a single instance. And that's where I think sometimes the comparisons with the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, are a little overwrought, because they're seeking to come out with a figurative quantitative estimate of global warming and rise. That is not the purpose of the scientific panel. It's really to produce a tour d'horizon, to examine where we are in the science, and to articulate there where are the gaps, where are the controversies, where are the consensus, where are the sort of emerging trends. The second aspect of that is I don't think there's any sense that the panel would, in and by itself, be undertaking original research. I think it's very much a sense of how do we build on these emerging networks of research and science from across the globe. And of course, GPI's work on that, OECD's work on that, the UK scientific report is absolutely essential, and I think would form an important base. So I think it's less about thinking than perhaps compiling, catalyzing, and looking at some of that articulation. But equally, I think there is a sense that it can also ask questions and nudge research in particular directions. Because if we are continuing to be driven by largely market incentives, significant areas of development priorities may not necessarily be addressed in the research. That the research follows the money. All of us who've spent time in a university know that. And so that, I think, is really where I think it's trying to say we can nudge towards gaps and we can nudge towards priorities, even if we're not undertaking that research. But it was a sensitive issue, and I think it also speaks to something that will be a challenge going forward, and I want to be very frank about that. The panel was very clear it has to be multidisciplinary, that as we think about scientific understanding, it must be driven by the experts, but experts as understood as to include humanity, philosophy, and as well as compute and data scientists. And that will have to be something that member states commit to and drive forward. And then finally, its independence. It cannot, I think, be driven by government officials and appointees. We live in a fractured geopolitical time, that's very clear. But here I would say there are plenty of experiences. The UN has not one, but many different panels. The panel on chemical waste, the panel on biodiversity. So there is some consensus around that experience of bringing together experts.
Great. We'll come back to your question.
On your resilience. Maybe I would just flag on this. I would flag two things that were interesting in the Global Digital Compact discussions, one on AI and the other more broadly on resilience. The first was, often there's a concern that when a debate on technology comes to the UN, it's going to have a braking function. It stops things, it slows things down, it talks about dangers, it talks about risks, it talks about inequalities. I think what emerged for me very much in these discussions over the last year and a half was how much the developing countries saw it as an opportunity and really see AI as an opportunity and have a degree of limited patience with framing the AI governance debate only around safety. They want much more focus on opportunity engagement, and to that end, enjoy a resilience discussion over a safety discussion. So I think there's a really important entry point there for looking at what does resilience systems look like. The second aspect was, I think, there was a strong sense around digital trust and safety and information integrity, these issues, that we need to start moving to much more upstream discussions on resilience building of societies and how do we build resilient societies, resilient children, resilient young people on that discussion. So that has come out, I think, particularly in the space around harms to humans and individuals.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking Renata Dwan for being with us and Gabriela, who can't be with us.
Thank you.